Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast, where I teach educated, successful couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships so that you can stop compromising and start feeling fully alive in your relationship. I'm Alexandra Stockwell, aka the Intimacy Doctor. I'm a physician, a relationship and intimacy coach, and I'm an intimate marriage expert. My husband and I have been married for 27 years. We have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing marriage. I've shown hundreds of couples how to do so as well. So if you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place. I will show you how. Now, let's dive in. A warm welcome to Doctors Derek and Emma Andre. You are former clients, friends, and people I deeply respect and admire, and I'm so glad you're joining me here on the Intimate Marriage Podcast. Along with my welcome, I'd like to invite the two of you to introduce yourselves. Let listeners get a sense for each of you professionally and the length and flavor of your marriage at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're so glad to be here. Do you want me to start?
Yeah.
So my name is Emma Andre, and I'm a naturopathic physician, just like Derek, and have been since 2010. We currently live in Bend, Oregon, on a lovely farm property just outside of town. And we are currently in the midst of launching a new practice here from a pretty significant career pivot that we're really excited about, and using psychedelic medicine and addressing mental health with holistic and natural medicine. And so that's what we've been up to.
I'm going to add that you were born and raised in Sweden.
That's true.
I feel like that's a significant part of your introduction, and that you then moved to the East Coast with your family and were raised there through your teenage years, and then the rest of your life is spent in Oregon.
That is true. Lived a little here and there. That
Swedish culture really permeates our family, so I feel like it's an important part to acknowledge. So all my memory has been in Oregon. I've pretty much lived here all my life in various parts of Oregon, and I'm really loving living in Central Oregon now. Emma inspired me to become a naturopathic doctor. I was watching her coming home from med school, just with these incredible new ways of looking at health and disease and treating disease. And I was like, dang, I want to do that with you. The world needs this. Let's do this together. And we've been doing it together ever since about 2006. And when we first graduated, we were pretty general, kind of, I would consider us kind of like a primary care provider, but with a naturopathic philosophy. And like Emma said, since then, we've just been, we noticed pretty quickly in spending a lot of time with patients that they're the true, part of the naturopathic philosophy is to go to the root cause of things. And the root cause was so often in the mental, emotional, spiritual realm. And so we've been gravitating over the years more and more towards mind-body medicine, holistic mental health. And that's where we find ourselves now. It's really fun to be here and to really feel like we're helping people get at the root of so many of their ailments of why they first come to us.
And I want to add that part of why that really matters for us is we've done a lot of that work together, and so much of it is based on personal growth. And that's a really deep value for us in both our relationship, in our individual lives, and in our family.
Yeah.
So
the last thing I'll add is we've been together for 21 years as a couple, and married for about 15 years. And we have 2 children, a 12-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy, and a dog and a golden retriever named Gus.
And a white picket fence.
Everybody needs a golden retriever. That's so great. Okay. Well, one question about your introduction, and then we'll dive into our topic today. Have you always worked together? It sounds like you think about your careers growing together. But as I recall, you haven't actually been in business with one another the whole time. Is that right?
Well, so I graduated 2 years before him. And so I joined my mom in her practice in her physical location. We had separate businesses, but same location. And then when Derek finished, he joined us, and him and I did have a business together. So that, and then we ran that practice for about 10 years in Portland. That was the primary care one. So we did in fact run that together, in a way in which we really divided tasks, but were, working together under the same roof of the same business.
It was interesting. It's like we were and we weren't together, Alexandra. It was like we were running the business together, but then she would go in her little square and worked with patients, and I would go in my square, my little room, and work. And so I never got to see behind the scenes what she was like with patients. And it's funny how we've been told by a lot of people, like, you guys need to team up. You need to do more things together. Put yourselves out there together. And we're starting to do that more. And I'm starting to really see the potency of us as a unit working with either a patient or a group of patients, which is really my passion. And we'll probably get into that. But so to answer your question, yes and no. And it seems like it's moving in that direction, which is really exciting.
Okay, wonderful. Well, as in every single conversation I have with the two of you, there are so many different directions to go, but I actually come to this conversation, as you already know, with a little bit of an agenda, because I have met many couples who have gone on to become my clients. And when reflecting on their past experiences, they'll say, we worked with a therapist and it helped for a little while, and then we were back to where we were. This is something I haven't counted how many times I've heard this, but the first time I heard it, I just decided I just never want to be that person where people say, well, we coached with her and it helped while we were working with her and for a little while afterwards, but it doesn't actually turn out to be sustainable. And so ever since that very influential experience, the first time a couple said that to me, I have been very deliberate and very intentional in every program I create and how I work with people, that it really, when people go deep with the work, that it creates lifelong lasting results. And I suppose the longest example of that I have is myself. My husband and I have been married for 27 years. Not that we have been living an intimate, profound, passionate marriage the whole time. The first 10 years, I never would have described it that way, but it's my husband and I that are the longest example. And I have coached couples who, with very long marriages, and it's just incredible to see how they open up, and it's clear it's there to stay. One of the podcast interviews is with a couple that's been married for 51 years. And on the interview, she talks about having the best orgasms of her life. In other words, things get better and better. So when I connect with prior clients, they routinely tell me, we use the tools you taught us every single day. It doesn't mean they're thinking about me, but it's very much alive. And the two of you, in your eloquence, your devotion to the quality of your marriage, and your professional commitment to mental health, I thought it would be just this beautiful opportunity to hear from the two of you, because you were my clients in 2019 and 2020. And since that time have been through just one intense experience after another. Maybe the two of you could give an overview of that unfortunate collection of intense experiences, and then also talk about how the coaching that you experienced a number of years ago, how that has served you navigating what you've been through.
Yeah. I can, I can definitely speak to that. And I guess I'll just preface it too by saying that we are delighted to be on this podcast, because just to avoid the suspense, the working with you has been really sticky in the best way. Like you are on my mind a lot. The lessons are on my mind a lot, and it still influences us to this day. So to kind of wipe the suspense off the table. Like, did it work for them? Yes, it does. And I would say the unexpected thing about that is it's not just in our relationship, but as I've told you, it trickles down into our children and our relationship with them. That's an incredible side benefit that I had no idea would kind of come out of this.
It's a side benefit because I don't offer parenting coaching, but it's not a side benefit in my internal intentions. I was very clear in considering my life path professionally. Well, the second time I considered it, the first time I went to medical school and became a physician, but the second time I considered it, and I started thinking about all the children who need support in mental health. And what if that was just avoided by having childhoods that actually served? And what I came to, it's very basic, but I think the absolute best thing that I can do for children is teach their parents how to have great relationships. And so any couples that I coach who have children, I'm aware of the children and the ages, and I ask questions, and there are many of the things that couples learn, obviously not related to sensuality and sexuality and eroticism, although being more comfortable in that arena and being more comfortable talking about that definitely has a very positive trickle-down effect to the children. But I don't think of that as a side effect. I actually think of that as the unacknowledged meat and potatoes of the work that I do. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And that's why I was specific in calling it a side benefit. It's definitely not like a side effect, like a medicine side effect. Yes. And I love that you had the forethought of that, which I didn't have going into working with you. And that we talk about, because we're in mental health, holistic mental health, we talk a lot about preventive mental health, like taking care of yourself so that when stuff does hit the fan, you're ready for it. You have some resiliency build up. And what better way than to have happy, loving, intimate parents for preventive mental health, not just for the parents, but for the kids, so that when they get challenged, which we all will, everyone goes through struggles.
Right. I don't have this tagline, but in my mind, I think couples come to me for the pleasure and leave with a legacy.
Yeah. And it doesn't just stop with kids. Like I've also seen it permeate the work with patients that we do, colleagues, friends. So it's relationships, and it starts with this core one, which is the most important one. And then I think it radiates out from there. So it's huge. Yeah. Just such a huge fan of what you do. And it's also why we're in this field as well. But back to your question. So should I jump into kind of that sure. timeline of what, so yeah, it was pretty, like I said, we started a sort of a general practice in around 2010, give or take. And we were seeing anything and everything under the sun as general practitioners, from head to toe, inside to out. And after spending time with people, it got pretty clear that their core issues were so often derived from mental, emotional, spiritual disharmonies, and that's where we needed to go if we were really going to go to the root cause. So we slowly started transitioning to doing that kind of work. The irony was here we were sitting across from people, helping them with real struggles like loss, grief, divorce, getting fired, these or getting a heavy diagnosis. And yet Emma and I had a pretty, we both come from good childhoods, relatively good childhoods, not significant childhood trauma. And not a lot of trauma in general in our life, not a lot of massive struggle. Well, it was almost like the powers that be were like, oh, you're going to go down this road and do this work. We're going to help you really learn what it's like to do this work. We're going to give you the tools of what you need to know in order to do this work. And that started in 2017 when we suddenly got a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer for Emma's father, whom we both loved dearly and had a deep relationship with. And without sparing the details, he went in for a surgery to kind of get a better biopsy, and just never left the ICU. It was a 30-day decline of just literally watching this beautiful man kind of wither away in the ICU, ironically in the ICU that he worked in. So he was surrounded by his family, his work family, because he was an anesthesiologist in that hospital. So that was like adding drama and trauma to the whole thing. That was quickly followed by we moved in with her mother, who became a widow after that, and was just devastated, as were we. And so we moved in together with our very young kids at that time, and we were supporting one another. Okay, so that was followed by finding a family member who had attempted suicide. We came in and found the family member still barely clinging for life. Actually proceeded to give CPR, call the paramedics, and save that individual's life. But then we were a part of rehabilitating the family member and just trying to get their life back together while also trying to maintain ours, while also grieving, while raising young kids. It was really heavy. I'm not going to lie. And right after those 2 episodes is when we started working with you, and we were like, boy, this was a lot. And little did we know we were only about halfway through. So I think we started working with you, like you said, in 2019, 2020. I can't recall exactly, but I believe we started working together before COVID was a household name, before that was a thing.
Mm-hmm. We did. We started in, I believe it was August, or it was that part of the year, whether it was August or September in 2019, when none of us knew what was coming towards us.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it was such a wonderful time to work with you, because we were just coming off of those 2 major earth-shattering events in our family and our life. And then we were also preparing for, we just needed a change, a fresh start after that. And so we were preparing an interstate move to go live closer to some of Emma's family, and just get out of where we were, get out of the home where we were. And then COVID hit, and it was right when we were trying to move. So that was sort of another, I don't know if I want to call it a trauma, but it was extremely stressful.
Well, at the time it was, because I remember just trying to find movers who would come and pack when nobody knew what was COVID safe yet.
Yeah, this was like February, March of 2020, and the whole world was freaking out. Is this gonna, kill us all? How does this spread? And so that was yet another challenge, I think, even moving. And then not only that, but the place we were moving to, we had a job lined up, and that all blew up in our face. And so it was just, event after event. And it was like, can we get a break and have some space to just kind of grieve and rebuild and get some resiliency back behind us? When would you say was we kind of stopped that group work with you, that beautiful group that we had?
It was in the summer of 2020.
Okay. Yeah. So it was starting to get more comfortable. We were finally starting to kind of get our roots in our new area. We were down in Southern California at that time. And we were, I think, just kind of really feeling like it was home, and starting to kind of make a life for ourselves. COVID was I think the fear was starting to subside a little bit more. The job prospect was starting to kind of build up. And so we were feeling good about life again, and feeling like we had made the right decision. And then Emma's mother went out for a hike. She was an avid hiker, and she went out for a hike about 10 minutes from our house and was just senselessly killed in broad daylight. And it was the most shocking thing you could ever imagine. I remember just being in shock with you for like a month, where we weren't able to feel anything but sort of scared for our family and terror and just disbelief of like, how could this happen to such just a beautiful, harmless, person?
They didn't know who it was for a month. So, there's a lot of layers there, being personally investigated, and of not knowing if somebody was after us at the same time as just processing what had happened.
I want to just say you're so gracious, Emma. Personally investigated, meaning one of the options was that one or both of you had done this. And that, I understand, was crossed off the list, but that was part of the initial experience of this occurrence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then having news people wanting to interview us and showing up and
knocking on our door, trying to protect our kids from this.
And being that we were so new in the area, not having community, feeling very alone. But what's so fascinating, what was born out of that was the little inroads that we had made with some people really, they just started to step up and really hold us. And out of this situation was born this community that really rallied around us and became some of our closest friends while we were there. And it showed me firsthand for the first time in my life, the potency of the medicine of community, when people really lovingly come around and hold you and just show up with unconditional love. It kind of brings me to tears just thinking about it, because it was such a beautiful thing to come out of such a horrible, like the greatest light came out of the greatest darkness in our life.
As a concrete example, the pastor from the church down the street where Derek had went just once to check it out, knocked on our door and said, "How can we help?" And a friend of mine had set up a meal train, and the whole church signed up, and we didn't cook a meal until like New Year's.
They really showed up for us, and that's just one of many ways that they did.
Yeah.
So I share that part because it made me realize how important, like so much healing comes from community, like so much potential for healing comes from community. And so that's also becoming a part of what we're pivoting into and kind of transitioning into as we redefine our work. I tried to give a condensed version of kind of what we went through before working with you. And then it was like the point of working with you. And then what happened after, where we got to, kind of put to the test of what we learned with you. Is there anything that I kind of missed? Because it's hard to condense those 4 intense years into 10
there's a lot
minutes
there.
of speaking.
No, not story wise.
Okay.
Again, I'm just really grateful you're here telling this story. And in another context, I'd respond more directly to some of what you've shared, but I want to broaden it or narrow it. You could look at it either way, actually, to talk a little bit about your marriage, because one of the things that I've observed in speaking with you more recently and today is how profoundly aligned the two of you are. You have your individual voices, but I really feel like I'm interacting with a union. I'm interacting with you, Emma, and I'm interacting with you, Derek, but I'm really interacting with a union, a kind of like below the surface, although to me very explicit, resonance and communion and connectedness where each of you feels respected and cherished. And to be really frank, I wouldn't have said that when I first met the two of you and you were talking about, how to decide who packs which boxes for the move, or how to navigate bath time with your children. Like, one of the things that really comes to mind in the presence of this beautiful connection you have is how then you both really yearned for it, but none of the ways that either of you independently could think of to create it actually produce that feeling that you now have. So the fact that you have it through one experience after another, which in most people's lives contributes to more disconnection, more division. The rate of divorce correlates very specifically with going through grief and loss, because two people invariably grieve in different ways, and then they feel even less seen. And anyway, I don't want to really go down that path, except to say that pretty much everything that you've just shared are things that unravel marriages. And here the two of you are with this sacred bond that is so embodied, not the least bit theoretical, and just kind of part of the air that you breathe. And because I experienced you when that wasn't that way, I'd love to go back to, let's say, 2019, where you were both grieving, both wanting to feel seen, appreciated, and connected, and sometimes feeling that way and sometimes not feeling that way. Those are my words, my memories. But can you maybe paint the picture of how it was then a little bit?
There's something that I feel compelled to share to punctuate your point. Emma kind of shared this with me one day. She shared this list of the kind of major life stressors that tend to cause people to kind of drift apart. And it's like losing a job, losing a loved one, moving. I would add pandemic to that list now that we've all kind of gone through that, and so on. And we were looking at that list, and within a 1 year span, we had like 4 or 5 of them, all within a year. And it was
and
like
each one independently,
yeah,
really is a major stressor and unravels a marriage on its own. So 4 of them at once. Yes, I'm in awe.
And as are we. And I guess so. Where I was going with that is to punctuate that point, but then also talk about how I think part of it was doing this work beforehand, and that combined with the thing that drew me to Emma back when we were just little puppies at age 22 and 20 was that I could tell she valued growing as a human, and I was also, the 20s are when we find ourselves, right? And we were both just trying to grow and flourish and start to bud as young adults. And I could tell that she loved that. And I think she saw that in me. I'm not going to speak for her. I feel like she's told me that. And I feel like our initial attraction is based in that. And I want to give ourselves credit for part of how we made it through all those hard times is we have this growth oriented approach. It's like, okay, we have this thing. How can we find a lesson in this? And how can we grow together in this? I think if one of us was growth oriented and the other wouldn't, invariably our trajectory would have been like this, plateaued and like
and for those of you who aren't watching, there's one hand going in one direction, the other in another.
yeah, just going in very different directions.
Yeah.
You can imagine, and I'm sure you've seen this in couples as well that you've worked with when one has a growth oriented mindset and another one is maybe stuck or doesn't.
Yeah, I would say the word that keeps bouncing around in my mind about this is choice. And I think maybe prior to working with you, I can't speak for you, but I didn't really understand the orientation of choosing myself and choosing the relationship. I think prior to that, I was probably a little bit more focused on my experience and choosing to look at that and not necessarily making choices that were oriented about what is going to be best for this relationship because that's going to be better for me ultimately. So working with you brought awareness to places where I did not previously see those choices available. Like it brought awareness to the patterns that had me contributing to us arguing over something or having a hard time working something out. So, and that I think continues to be a theme in a successful relationship is to keep choosing the relationship, even when things get really hard. And whatever that means can really vary for different people.
Yeah, I want to highlight a point you're making. So you're making it so beautifully, but I think each of us tends to, when things are not easy, either focus on our own needs or, quite frankly, focus on our partner's needs and compromise, acquiesce, adjust, even if that also builds resentment, but that we somehow can connect with one priority or the other, and to really develop the sensibility for what the relationship needs and distinguish that from what my partner needs, meaning not that I don't get my own needs met, but that in having attention on what the relationship needs, then you really both get to flourish.
Yeah. And I think prior to working with you, that my awareness was really only on either what my needs were or being one of those who would tend to acquiesce to what his needs were and then leave me resentful, but not finding the place in the middle that really actually serves me best in the end, but requires a little bit of humility and willingness to show up and do my own work.
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment that she's absolutely right. After working with that group of couples and you, what I think has come up for me since then, I was just reflecting, is that I'm able to notice more readily. Okay, I want to preface this by saying we are not a perfect couple. We still argue. We still bicker about minor and trivial things and then come back around and realize that.
I suppose it depends how you define perfect couple. That to me sounds perfectly perfect.
Sure, fair, right. For normal. I just didn't want to paint this picture to the audience of like, yeah, we have no problems. Like it just, that I don't think that exists. And I also kind of learning, I just gave this example of how much we grew out of these incredible challenges. Mm-hmm. I welcome these moments together because they're opportunities to grow and learn as people and as a couple, as a union, like you were saying. And so I didn't want to paint this picture that since working with you, we have no problems,
Yes, but actually you say something that I want to expand on, because in my mind, the goal is not to have no disagreements, to have no conflict, to have no challenges. I mean, that's just a dumb goal. It's like
it might not be attainable too.
Yeah, like it just doesn't. It's just kind of, it doesn't go anywhere. But the goal absolutely is to get the education, practice, cultivate, and become ever more masterful with the way of being, the skills, the tools that allow you to use conflict to create more connection, disagreements to create more connection. You don't go there right away and skip over the disagreement. You have to have it, but to be able, like I'm actually kind of in awe of an element that I didn't appreciate until I just heard you speak, because I really believe in these tools and attitudes, perspectives, the qualities that I teach in all of my programs and with private clients, that they're ways of navigating disagreements and stress that allow you to become closer and learn more about yourself and one another. And I don't think I've actually ever had a conversation with former clients who've put that to the test on the order in which the two of you have with the events of your life since 2020. And I know that this happens when it's a disagreement about whose turn it is to take out the trash, or a disagreement related to sex or finances, or any of the more normal, whether the child goes to public school or private school, like all of the more usual things that arise where people have hurt feelings and different perspectives, and it's painful and complicated. I know that every one of those, using what I coach, can lead to more connection, more depth, more closeness, and more fulfilling intimacy. But to have that be the case in these extreme traumatic circumstances, I wouldn't theorize. Like I know better than to theorize, but you're sharing with me, no, they work in that kind of context too.
Mm-hmm. 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 I don't think it's a coincidence or an accident that we had just completed working with you when sort of our darkest days fell upon us. Mm-hmm. And to kind of use your example of bickering over taking out the trash, right? It seems so superficial, and it is. It's this, just like our work, that is a superficial symptom of a deeper underlying disharmony. Mm-hmm. That's where we're trying to go as doctors, and I'm sure you're trying to go with your work with people. It's like, and so where I was kind of going with that is, when these things come up, when I feel the bicker over something superficial like taking out the trash, I'm able to take a minute and go, okay, what am I really upset about? Because this isn't it. This is how it's manifesting itself. Mm-hmm. And I think that Emma's able to not, I have a tendency to be maybe of the two of us, I'm the more impatient one. I can be the more fiery one. And that's just a nice way of saying I can get mad easier. And she's able to see like, oh, there's something deeper here. And I feel more compassion from her of like, oh, I'm not going to get stuck on this superficial thing. There's something else here. I need to help him and also help me see it. But I'm also able to see it sooner too, if that makes sense after working with you. So I'm able to notice it sooner, which is awesome because then it doesn't fester and become, now I'm bickering over something bigger,
Right. And it takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
Without that objectivity.
That isn't so superficial like the trash. And now it's something about the kids or something about work. And like it, right. It just like disease. If we just swipe it under the rug, it just festers and grows bigger. But the shift that I'm feeling from her in putting the union first is she goes, oh, there's a disharmony here. He's feeling something and this is how it's manifesting. What can we do to bring balance to this? And that is so situational dependent. I can't give a single example right now, but there's several. Actually, is this a good time to kind of share some of the tools that have really stuck with us?
Sure, please go ahead. Yeah.
So one big one is she will ask permission to give me feedback. So like if I'm in that mode and she just starts dumping her feedback on how I'm showing up, it bounces off and it's daggers coming back at her. I'm not ready to hear it. So now she'll ask. And if I am, I say yes. And then I know it's my responsibility to let it in and not throw daggers back. And the thing that I think you gave me, if I remember correctly, that's been working is to just sit with the feedback and not like it's a one-way conversation. She gives and I receive. And that is not the time to like share how I'm feeling. Because when I'm the type of person, I'm sure there's a lot of people like there and probably a lot of men out there that are like this, where when I receive feedback, it's sort of like shaking up a soda can. And that is not the time to open up the soda can. That's not the time for me to talk back about what she just told me. Like go and set the soda can down for a while, let those bubbles kind of fizzle out, process it, and then come back and have that conversation. And that single skill has helped so much with her being able to get the things out and I'll let her speak to this, how that's so important to her to feel intimacy, to be able to get those out. If she can't, she ends up feeling more frustrated at me. It's like it doubles it up. So she's now frustrated about maybe how I responded and that she can't tell me about it. It's a double whammy. But then the other thing it does is it allows me to actually to let the feedback come in and go, this is a woman I care about more than anybody else in the world. And she's telling me this stuff, take it to heart. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do with it? And not just have it bounce off because my ego doesn't like to hear it in that heated moment.
And talking about these things in the coaching container with you, I also started to appreciate that this wasn't something he was necessarily in the moment choosing in terms of how to react. It was a reaction and not necessarily always a chosen response, because my initial response used to be one of judgment. And then he would feel that as shame, which just made him more angry. And so I was kind of feeding into the degree to which that anger came up, but I wasn't aware that I was doing that. So bringing awareness to that. I also want to add that throughout all of these traumas, it gave us an opportunity to put these things to the test. But one really important aspect that I'm just sort of naming right now is that when I was really we were both in a very dark spot, and they were my parents, and it gave him an opportunity to really be a solid and a very soft container for me. And I think I had always wanted that. I had always wanted to be held in that way. And I can't help but think that there's something inherent in the dynamic for us between the masculine and the feminine, of that being something that I wanted, but maybe hadn't felt to that degree. And prior to all of this, I think we were both a bit more individualistic about our relationship, but that opportunity for conscious holding that came through moving through such intense grief, me allowing myself to be held and him stepping in to do that, I think is a really big part of what has improved our intimacy so much. But the only way to do that is to be aware of the things we do which get in the way of our willingness to hold each other that way or to be held.
One of the other skills that has really stuck with us and like I said earlier, has trickled down through our household to our children is this notion of a conscious redo also, which is such a well, of course, idea. And I had never seen it or heard of it or really seen it modeled before this. And that is that when we are fighting, bickering, when we're in that tense moment in our relationship, if one of us realizes that, hey, what are we doing before the other one, we can just kind of lovingly and gently ask for a conscious redo to just literally just start over, sort of like a mulligan in golf. Like, hey, can we just try this again? Because rather than just going down this crummy road where we're further driving the wedge between us. And
I think I just want to jump in and say,
please.
I think doing it acknowledges that we make mistakes and we say things sometimes that we don't mean. And it's okay. We can go back and change it.
And what's beautiful about it is even if, like, let's say, this is rarely the case, but let's say I'm the one who hasn't even been making the most mistakes. If we're keeping a tally, if I'm the one who notices that where I'm falling short in that relationship, and I say, hey, can we have a conscious redo? Just modeling that, like, hey, I feel really bad about how I just said that to you. That was not from the heart. That didn't feel right, even as I said it, and I want to acknowledge that. Can we have a conscious redo? And I can say that over again, even if I'm not the one who maybe in the balance sheet of who's being harder on the other. It helps the other person go, oh, like it's such a beautiful modeling for the person who's maybe more charged in that moment to also do that. It's a very compassion first thing. And so I guess what I want to share with that is the kids one time saw us doing, we try to never fight in front of the kids, but invariably it happens because when you're in a smaller home together, you just see it or hear it down the hall or whatever. And the kids saw us do it one time. And then I don't remember if we even taught our daughter about it, but she just,
I think we did.
I don't know if it was just from seeing it or maybe she asked about it or something like that. But there was a time when we were kind of bickering with our daughter. And she goes, Dad, can we have a conscious reading? And it just floored me. I was like, whoa, where did that come from? And she was the one to notice it first. She felt that it felt bad for her. She was like, I want this to feel good. Can we start again? And man, it's been such a lesson to apply these to relationships with these little young budding humans that we're growing.
The tricky part with it is to separate truly wanting to start over from bypassing what just happened, which, occasionally with kids, they need to learn the difference between just erasing whatever they did that we need to actually address.
Yeah, I think
in order to get what they want.
She sort of cleverly was using it as like, hey, let's just wipe all that off the table like it never existed. We're going to re-record over that. And it's like, no, sweetie, that doesn't just go away.
We still got to address it.
Yeah. But you're right. Let's talk from a heart-centered place rather than this maybe mind or ego-centered place that's taking over.
It doesn't get rid of the topic, but you can press restart for the manner of interaction. It's really beautiful. And honestly, I could just keep listening to the way the two of you speak with such depth of like I can tell how this isn't just like a tool in the toolbox that is kept in the shed. And then when you want to build something, you go get it. No, these are tools that are really part of you and part of your authentic repertoire and how you interact with one another. I'm really enjoying experiencing that. And, when you were clients, you were part of a group coaching program. It was the Aligned and Hot Marriage Live program, which had another name back then. It was called the Conscious Partnership Program. But regardless, I think it was when you were in it, there were 6 couples. And we met every week, all 6 couples. And it really was such a rich experience. But honestly, I find when I talk to people who don't already know me and have never been in personal growth, learning, coaching contexts with other couples, they always think, well, I would never do this work in group, like maybe a women's group coaching or a men's group coaching, but to with my spouse be in a group coaching context with other couples, it's like, I don't want to air my dirty laundry. I don't want to be judged. I don't want to have anyone see this. And I really understand that. And also, there are the most incredible transformations that specifically can happen because it's in group coaching. And Derek, you are someone who, before anybody else in my life, said to me, this coaching is so deeply enhanced in the group setting. And I remember thinking, really? Like, it's good, but it just opened up a whole train of thought. And so I wonder if the two of you would reflect on that experience, because chances are everyone who listens hasn't actually ever had the experience of couples coaching in a small group environment. It's one thing if someone belongs to a church and there are marriage groups in the church and you all know one another, and what you're doing is both working on your marriages and Bible study and dinner together. Like, that's one situation. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about meeting online with multiple couples in their own home who've never met one another, who have something in their marriage that they really want to transform, evolve, and improve. And to some degree, it's painful, whether they feel lonely in the marriage or the quality of sex isn't fulfilling or whatever. They want to learn to communicate more authentically, and whatever it is, anyone listening, it is very unlikely that they have done that work or be attracted to doing that work with other couples. And I wonder if you could just speak to that based on your own experiences.
I had a sort of epiphany moment while I was listening to you talk just then, that the potency of the group is real. And I want to give you credit. I was reflecting on my experience, and why it worked is there's tremendous credit due to you, which is what scared me to death. Okay, I'm going to back up real quick before I give you the compliment. What scared me to death about doing this group with Emma is I knew things. I was, what's the right word? I was maybe scared to let sides of myself, like sides of how I show up as a husband, as a father, come out in community. I was nervous about that. I was apprehensive about that. But you have this artful way of, whether it was with me or anyone else in that group, you never made people feel bad for how they are, even if it was at their worst, even if like the worst sides of me were being shared. I never felt bad about it. You always made me feel completely accepted. And so what I want to honor is that I think this could go really wrong in a group of couples. If the person,
I agree.
Right? Like if the coach was, so I want to give an example. Like, I don't know if you're a Ted Lasso fan or if your listeners are a Ted Lasso fan, but he talks about doing couples therapy and how he would show up, and this is fictional, obviously, but I think this is real. And this is why the writers put this in the show. He would show up to this couples therapy, and the therapist and the wife would gang up on him, and he'd feel crummy after every meeting. Mm-hmm. And I think so too could be true in a group of couples and a coach or a therapist or whatever you want to, whoever's kind of guiding that. And so I don't know, I guess I just want to really honor you for the skillful way that I have never seen you bolster people, even when they're sharing their darkest stuff or the sides of them that they don't wish anybody to see, which is so beautiful because it allowed me to feel more comfortable in other so like we're both part of men's and women's circles, and in other group work, I started to feel more comfortable about sharing those sides of me if I felt like the container was safe. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to say that. I felt compelled to say that because it hit me in this moment, how important that was.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that was crucial. There's something that's very potent about group work in that I think, at least for me, that being that one of our basic human needs is to be seen and accepted and ultimately loved, it can feel really threatening to have other people hear something that might that we believe might lead to rejection. But my experience in group work is that the opposite is true, that when we are most willing to share of our true selves, it gives other people the permission to do the same, and it helps them connect to our true humanity. I think there's this unspoken belief, particularly in our society, in which if we just show our best selves, then everyone will believe that's all we are. And we all have things to work on. We're all going through things, and there's always ways in which we can improve. And if for me, being willing to show up to that group and go through that with and share it and then be seen in it, witnessed and accepted and not judged, has made me feel safe to do so, like you said, in other aspects of my life. I think that's just a really crucial part of the process.
It builds confidence, self-confidence.
Yeah. And seeing other couples, the fact that other couples do have struggles, whether we see them or not, actually seeing them in a group like this is beautiful, because I always learn something. When someone else is learning something for themselves, I learn from them. Mm-hmm. So they give me a gift. And I realized in this work, I was doing the same in sharing of myself. I was actually able to give people a gift, not something for them to take home and judge me for, but the opposite.
On the topic of judgments too, I noticed myself on occasion, I'd be listening to another couple talk when we were in that group, and this judging voice would come up, and I had to kind of check it and go, where is that coming from? And how is that showing up in my life? Like if I'm seeing that and judging that is very well in my own life. And I get to evaluate where that is. So that too was a learning experience for me too, in working with groups.
Yeah, I think that's part of that growth-oriented mentality, is knowing that if something's really triggering, there's something there for me to look into in one way or another.
Yeah. And I also think in doing group couples coaching, if a couple is really struggling with something that you're not struggling with, that is an affirming experience. And if a couple is struggling with something and you're also struggling with it, that is an affirming experience, because it's inspiring and it's normalizing. It's like if the other couples, like either it resonates or it doesn't, and it all really serves, because these are conversations nobody is having in terms of how to have a good marriage and make it better and more connected without needing to be dramatic or silent, which is generally the two ways it goes. Okay, well,
can I add something to that real quick before we change?
Please, yes.
I would say that the opposite can also be affirming in a sort of confidence bolstering way too. If I see a couple struggling with something that I'm like, wow, we're actually really handling that well, not in an ego way, but in like, hey, acknowledge where you are doing it well. It was kind of like pat ourselves on the back and like, yeah, we're doing really well in that area. It was kind of helpful to see that too. I wish they were also not struggling, right? I still have compassion for their struggle, but it would help me to see where we're winning as well.
Yeah. For the first time, I'm having the image that really one of the things that intimate group couples coaching offers is getting out of your own fishbowl, meaning you really only see what's inside, and whether it's seeing yourself more clearly. Well, it is seeing yourself more clearly through seeing what's happening with others. So yeah, I'm glad you said that. In every episode of the Intimate Marriage Podcast, because I have such a deep conviction that I know the two of you share, that intimate relationships are the ultimate vehicle for personal growth. I love to ask this question. I'm going to start with you, Emma. How have you grown, and what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Derek?
Well, wow, lots of things. The thing that's first thought, best thought. I have learned that it's really important for me to value and speak my truth, and that the way in which I do that will either create connection or the opposite, will break connection, however we want to say that. So being mindful and conscious about how I share my truth and to do it more often is really important for me in our relationship.
I love hearing that. Derek, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Emma?
I have learned that, and this is mostly through witnessing her modeling of this, that responding with calmness and kindness is our natural, that is our natural way. When I can get out of my reactionary mode, that is me. I get to be me in that moment. And she models that with her children, with me. Just this for the most part, not all the time, because life gets us worked up. But when she, which is more often than not, when she can respond with kindness and calmness, it models it for me. It shows me that it's possible and that I can access that as well. And the other part of that, I would say, is prioritizing self-care. I love the way that she takes care of herself. When she is feeling like her fuse is short, she'll go do something outside, or she'll rest and meditate, or she'll ask for some time to go paddling out on one of the beautiful rivers or lakes of Central Oregon that we live on. And yeah, I sometimes, when I'm out of my balanced state, might feel a little resentful that she can do that for herself. But then when I'm balanced and am feeling more in harmony with myself, I'm like, no, this is a beautiful thing. This is a gift that she's giving us. It's not just for her. It's so that she can give her best to us. So I would say those are two that really come to mind that she consistently models.
Thank you. And for someone who's listening and is inspired and wants to become a patient or a client, deepen their understanding of how they can find such profound connection, having been on the path of trauma, what's a good way to find the two of you, and whom do you invite to do so? We'll have links in the show notes, so that's not the point.
One thing that we didn't talk about so much here, but that's been a really important part of our path and our growth, both
and healing
personally and in our relationship, has been psychedelic medicine. It was there at every point after the traumas to help us come back to ourselves and work through things. And that is it's been such a potent journey for us that we made a whole career shift to bring that into what we offer people. And it's been the combination of the tools and the groundwork that we got from working with you, which we initially started doing, I think, with the thoughts of trying to make sure we could run a business together, but provided so much more depth, I think, than we realized coming into it. And having a tool like psychedelic medicines, which is a wonderful self-reflective tool and trauma treatment tool.
And heart opening. Yeah. I felt all the ways, all the skills that we learned from you amplified with medicine. That's something that I wanted to make sure to share on this show, that because we had those there, they were able to be, I would say, even bolstered or shine brighter when combined with psychedelic medicine. They go together quite beautifully.
And I think in our working with people, we're always drawing on the things that we learned whether that was this conscious partnership container that we were in with you, or for me in the women's coaching circle that I was also in with you, or whether it was the coaching dojo that was before that. I've just gained so much from you and learned so much from watching you. And I know those things show up in our practice. And as you mentioned earlier, our current practice is called Medicine Within. And we take patients anywhere in the state of Oregon. We have a virtual platform. Our website is medicinewithin.com. And that is for somebody who's interested in just seeing what we're doing. We have a lot of information on the site. And if they hop on our homepage, there's get started buttons in which everyone who's interested in working with us can schedule a free 20-minute chat just to see if it's a good fit, a no pressure call.
And in terms of audience, we are allowed to be doctors in the state of Oregon. So we can work with anyone in the state of Oregon, but we can be health consultants or health coaches to anybody anywhere who wants to have a virtual appointment. So they can reach out if they wish to do work in that regard.
A big focus of something that we've dove into and trained in is integration, which is coaching somebody who's had a psychedelic experience in being able to pull out the important pieces and make sense of what they went through. Many psychedelic experiences are very abstract. And sometimes if we don't put in the work right after to really pull out of it the meat of what was just shown, of what was just realized, then we miss a big opportunity, because the medicine is important, but the medicine is just the doorway. So our focus is really on what do we do with what we got out of it, instead of leaning on the medicine to be doing the work. How do we engage with that? How do we use that? So we do offer integration as well for anyone in the US.
The final thing I'll say about that, if it's okay, is that we chose the name Medicine Within because we were brainstorming, what do we call this new shift that we're doing with our practice? And we realized that in our culture, in this Western culture, so much of the solution, looking for solutions, is outside of ourselves. We're constantly looking for the drug, the surgery, maybe the therapist or a guru or something outside of ourselves. I will be whole if I can just get this thing. And something that I learned working with you, working with other teachers, is that we are inherently whole. We do need to create harmony in our life. And that needs to be on the physical, mental, emotional, and even spiritual planes. But the goal of the work that we do, much like you, Alexandra, is to help people find the solutions within themselves. That's where the lasting changes come from. So just wanted to kind of make that note.
And that's inherent to naturopathic philosophy, is we believe that the body and the psyche has this inner wisdom, and it's our job to try to get out of the way to allow that inner wisdom to express itself. And this really means showing up with a very similar, I don't know what the word is, vibe as to how you show up with people is just energy. Like Derek said, energy. Thank you. I feel like when you show up, I feel wholly accepted as I am right now.
That might be the biggest gift that I've received from you, Alexandra, is I feel completely safe to be my full self, the parts that I reject or judge or criticize about myself, all the way to the parts that I love about myself and everything in between. And I think as health practitioners, as providers, as coaches, whatever we want to put the label on it, that might be, as humans, that might be the single biggest gift we can give one another. So thank you for that.
I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.